There isn't a liberal alive right now in Canada that I believe I would be able to vote for. Maybe there's one or two. But I don't think there's a liberal alive that I could vote for of my own free will that's alive right now in Canada. And that's not because I'm a conservative. I'm an independent. I've always said I'm an independent. I'm not a I don't belong to any party. I don't belong to conservatives, NDP, liberals, Green. But I am an independent voter who has certain values. And for the most part, they're to the right of the political spectrum. But I am an independent, and I believe that the liberal, pretty much all the liberals that I know of in Canada that are alive right now, go against most of what I believe in. So I couldn't vote for them of my own free will. You know, Justin the Tarface Mac Daddy. Now that's just a no-brainer. I would never, he's the son of Satan. You know that. I would never even dream of. The devil would get my vote before the Tarface Mac. Besides, the Tarface Mac Daddy is the son of Satan. But this new leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, Bonnie Crombie, I'll be honest with you. If you put a gun to my head, or if you threaten to Jesus whip me, and unless I voted for either Doug Ford, who is the current Premier of Ontario and the leader of the Conservatives, or Bonnie Crombie, who is the Mayor of Mississauga and the leader of the Liberals in Ontario, I'd probably have to go for Bonnie Crombie. I'd have to go for Bonnie Crombie. I'd have to vote for Bonnie Crombie. And that's not because I like her or anything like that. As I said, I couldn't vote for her willingly of my own free will. But if you threaten my life and you told me you have to choose either Doug Ford or Bonnie Crombie, or I'm going to pull this trigger, I'll go for Bonnie Crombie. I believe Bonnie Crombie has done more for Mississauga than Doug Ford has done for Ontario. Hell, I think Kathleen Wynne did more for Ontario than Doug Ford did for Ontario. And I think Kathleen Wynne was probably more for the people than Doug Ford was. At least she, extended the, OHIP coverage, the Universal Basic Income Pilot Project, many other different things. Doug Ford has done absolutely nothing as Premier. I can't think of any major powerful, revolutionary, populist legislation that Doug Ford has done. I believe he is the most disappointing leader that Canada has ever produced in my lifetime. And I know it's a very short lifetime, 31 years, and I'm sure there'll be more, but that's my opinion. Now, I didn't say the most revolting Canadian leader. That title goes to Justin the Tarface, son of Satan, Mac Daddy Trudeau. That's the most revolting in my lifetime. But Doug Ford is the most disappointing leader that Canada's ever produced in my lifetime. I voted for him in 2018, and there's no way I could ever vote for him again. It's not just because of the coronavirus lockdowns and the vaccine mandates, because that in and of itself is enough to never get my vote. I mean, unless he were to denounce it, which he's never going to do. Locking down the entire province. Anybody who supported lockdowns or who participated in lockdowns and mandates, which have destroyed our economy. We're living with inflation, all this sort of problems. And anyone who supported that over a virus which only killed less than 1% of people who got it. And as a result, you bring in all these measures which have caused hell for the world. I can never support you ever again. You'd have to repent and beg for forgiveness if I were to ever give you another chance. And I know I haven't seen any politician who's participated in them do that. But that's not the only reason I could never support Doug Ford again. Doug Ford is useless. Doug Ford has done nothing of note. I mean, at least Kathleen Wynne, at least she did she coverage, more coverage for people on OHIP, the UBI, Universal Basic Income pilot project. At least she did things of note. Doug Ford, I can't think of anything Doug Ford has done in the years he has been premier. I can't think of any, even though he hasn't even lowered taxes. I mean, I know I'm pretty used to conservatives in Canada, conservative politicians in Canada being pretty useless. But the one thing you can usually count on is that they'll lower taxes. The one thing you can, at least they will lower taxes. Doug Ford hasn't even done that. I mean, he said he would reform the sex education. He hasn't done that. Children in Ontario today are being taught there are more than 2 genders. He said he was going to open up the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario, create jobs, and, we would exploit our natural resources instead of having to rely on others. He hasn't done that. I haven't heard of anything from the Ring of Fire. He said he would build houses because, we're being flooded with all this mass immigration, and I'm not against immigration, but I only support productive immigrants like my parents were, and some of you people or some of your family were. But now we're being flooded with a lot of destructive immigration. And productive immigrants and people like me who were born in Canada have to compete with these destructive immigrants on housing. And houses have become so expensive. And he said he would build more houses to, lighten to ease the burden. And he would build houses on the Greenbelt. And when things got too tough for him, he backtracked. Everything he says he's going to do, he backtracks. The things he said he was going to do on the campaign trail, he doesn't do. So he's useless. He's completely useless. He says he's for the people. He's not for no people. He's not for the people. Doug Ford is an embarrassment to the Ford name. If Rob Ford was in his shoes, I bet you my seat in heaven, Rob Ford would have done a lot more for Ontario than Doug Ford has done, because Rob Ford wasn't afraid of criticism. He would do things for the people. He wasn't afraid of criticism. He wasn't. He was a bad man. Bad. He had the spine. Doug Ford doesn't have that. Now, Bonnie Crombie, hell, she builds houses. She's not afraid to build houses, unlike many of these other liberals and these lefties who want us to basically live in caves and eat bugs for the rest of our life and not build anything. Bonnie Crombie at least she supports the developers and the housing developers and the construction workers and the construction industry, the housing industry. She in the infrastructure industry, she supports them. She supports getting rid of some of the red tape to build houses and to build things. She supports it, and that's good. The economy in Mississauga sounds like it's doing very well. I mean, it's not, everywhere in Canada is doing badly because, we're being run by very bad, incompetent people, starting with the tar-faced Mac Daddy and all these other terrible premiers, with the exception of Danielle Smith. But she seems to have she seems to be holding her own in Mississauga. I mean, she's building houses. I mean, the economy seems to be doing well in Mississauga. Jobs seem to be, I hear jobs are being created. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the world. So she has done more as mayor of Mississauga than Doug Ford has done as premier of Ontario. That's my belief. And if you if you threatened me with death unless I chose to vote for Doug Ford or Bonnie Crombie, I'd go for Bonnie Crombie in 2 seconds. Now, that would have to be with my life being threatened. And first of all, I think that Bonnie Crombie will whoop the living daylights out of Doug Ford. I don't think Doug Ford has had a chance against Bonnie Crombie. I'll just tell you right now, she'll be the next premier whenever there's an election, if she continues to be the leader of the Liberals. But the only way I would ever vote for her of my own free will, she'd have to do 3 things. Number 1, she would have to denounce the teaching of children that there are more than 2 genders, and teaching very graphic sexual things to kindergartners and very young children. I'm not against sex education, but it has to be done with children who are old enough, children who are going through puberty, and you can't be teaching that there are more than 2 genders. That's number 1. Number 2, she would have to repent and apologize and beg for forgiveness as a result of going along with the vaccine mandates and the mask mandates and the coronavirus lockdowns and all that stuff. She'd have to repent for that. That's number 2. And number 3, she would have to denounce Justin the Tar-Faced Mac Daddy Trudeau. I don't think she'll do any of those 3 things. But if she were to do those 3 things, then I would vote for her of my own free will. But right now, the only way Bonnie Crombie would ever get my vote is if I was threatened with death to choose between Doug Ford and Bonnie Crombie. I mean, it's really sad how far Doug Ford has fallen in my opinion of him. I voted for him in 2018, and he has been a complete disappointment. So that's just where it is right now. As I said, I don't think I'll be voting Bonnie Crombie. I know unless she did those 3 things, I wouldn't vote for her of my own free will. I'd probably go for the New Blue Party or the Ontario Party or the Trillium Party or one of those. But I believe that she would be the lesser of 2 evils. I believe she has done more for Mississauga than Doug Ford has done for Ontario. I believe she would be a better premier than Doug Ford. That's just the way it is. This is